Sophie Cunningham walked into media availability and handed every Caitlin Clark and Indiana Fever fan exactly what they've been screaming for. She didn't ease into it, didn't soften it, didn't do the usual "we're working through it" routine. She went nuclear on the Indiana Fever front office and coaching staff, on record, in front of cameras. And when reporters went to ask Kelsey Mitchell about it, Mitchell had no idea it was already public. "How y'all know we had a meeting?" "Because Sophie told us." The Fever are 4 wins and 4 losses to start the season. Attendance is falling every home game, and Caitlin Clark is visibly arguing with her own coaching staff on national television. This isn't drama for clicks. This is a veteran player drawing a map of exactly what's broken. Why do you think the Indiana Fever is broken, and what should the team do about it? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Just what everyone's kind of feeling, where we need to be, what our identity is, offensively, where we're struggling, defensively, where is the breakdown. And so I think we were in there for like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, and we built back all the layers. And so I think everyone's on a good page right now, and we're ready to work.
Is that a player-initiated meeting, or coaches, or a bit of everybody?
We'll say started coaches and then ended up being player. So it was much needed, though. After not Golden State, after Portland, that's not it. We can't be playing like that. We're too good, and so we needed that meeting. And like I said, I think everyone's refreshed and ready to get going.
Let's start with Portland, because that game is where everything cracked open. Indiana came out sharp. They opened 8-2, looked like the team everyone expected them to be this season, and then Stephanie White pulled Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Lexi Hall out of the game simultaneously in the first quarter after around 3 minutes of play. 3 starters. At once, in a game Indiana was supposed to win without breaking a sweat. Portland didn't hesitate. They went on a 27-7 run to close the quarter, dropped 29 points before Indiana could recover, and never looked back. The Fever got outscored again in the third quarter. Final score 100-84. Against an expansion team Indiana beat by 17 points 10 days earlier, with Clark in the lineup on their home floor.
What was being said about the defense? Switching on everything, the lack of rotations, the non-existent paint D, the rebounding. Portland killed us with the offensive rebounds. What was being said about the rotations? If the coaches left the meeting and let it be players only.
White's explanation when pressed was that it was a typical rotation. But here's what doesn't add up. You don't skip film from a typical loss. Players watch film after every single game, good or bad. That's the job. Stephanie White specifically said she chose not to show film from Portland because the X's and O's weren't going to help us move forward. Sophie confirmed it from a different angle. "We didn't even watch film. That tells you how bad it is. Normally she's watching every second of it." Think about what that actually means. The coaching staff looked at that game film and decided the players couldn't handle watching it as a group. That's not load management for tired legs. That's damage control for a performance so indefensible that breaking it down possession by possession would only make things worse.
But something tells me that Stephanie White hovered around to make sure that she wasn't getting bad-mouthed, so the players couldn't really say their part.
Wow. And the thing is, the on-court disaster doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a trend that's showing up in the building itself. The first home game this season was a sellout. Second game dropped to around 15,600. The C argued there are legitimate structural reasons for the early struggles. New players, a condensed preseason, players coming from different systems, and those factors are real. But Portland isn't a test of your new rotation. Portland was a team Indiana should have handled without a second thought. Instead, they got blown out by 16, didn't watch film afterward, and had to hold a 2-hour intervention the next day just to get back to square one.
2 hours?
That's what she said. She said
No concept of time.
It just kept getting longer eventually.
that's how long she felt it was, I guess. How productive was that? What did you guys gain out of that?
I think it's productive. I think anytime you get an opportunity to have authentic, real conversation, it's good. This is collaborative stuff with us, and some of it's execution, and some of it's learning one another, and some of it's dealing with all the things that our team has to deal with.
What makes the Portland game impossible to write off as a bad night is the specific way it happened. Indiana had the lead. Indiana had their best players on the floor. And then the coach made decisions that handed the game to an expansion franchise, while the people responsible for those decisions couldn't bring themselves to put the film on. That's not growing pains. That's a coaching problem that's been covered up with the language of process. The Portland blowout wasn't the start of something bad. It was the moment a slow-building problem finally became impossible to hide. Here's where Sophie Cunningham stopped being diplomatic. A reporter asked her a simple question about defensive tactics. What she said back wasn't a media-trained non-answer. It was a confession that every opponent scout in the league is going to clip and send to their coaching staff. Something that's hurting us right now is we're only playing one defensive scheme, and in this league, it's too good. People are going to pick us apart.
Defensively, what areas do you think you all can grow in? You talked about the toughness
All
part,
of them.
but also, are there tactics? Are there things you can do from a technical standpoint?
Yeah, toughness is one of them. You just have to be willing to play defense. It's not fun. No one wants to do it, but the good defensive teams, they're the teams that win, and we have the personnel to do it. I think something that's hurting us right now is we're only playing one defensive scheme, and in this league, it's too good. You can't, and people are going to pick us apart.
One scheme. In a league where teams are running 5, 6, 7 different coverages depending on the matchup, the Indiana Fever, a team built to contend for a championship, are walking into every game with a single defensive answer, and every team in the WNBA has already figured it out. Last season, Sophie said the Fever had roughly 10 defensive schemes they could deploy. 10. The difference between this year and last isn't the roster, it isn't the talent level, it isn't Clark recovering from injury. The difference is that this group can't execute what the coaches are drawing up, so they've stripped the playbook down to the one thing nobody breaks down on. Switch everything. 1 through 5. Every screen, every action, every possession.
We got to dial in, we got to focus. Your IQ has to be on point. You have to know what schemes we're doing, and if you can't do that, then you can't play, and that's the point where we're at right now.
When you say you're playing one defensive scheme, that you have others installed, you just start ready to run them in games?
We had probably 10 of them last year. Each team has stuff up their sleeve, but if you can't execute them, you can't do them. And so this team really does have to focus. We have a lot of young guns. We have a lot of people who are very talented, but at the same time, you have to dial in and know what we're doing. Otherwise, it just won't work. And so we had a long meeting yesterday. It was a really good meeting, and so hopefully we've kind of turned the page and everyone is kind of on the same page now.
And here's the brutal consequence of that decision. When you switch 1 through 5 on every single screen, you're telling opponents exactly where to attack. They don't need to scout you for 5 games. Golden State figured it out. The entire league is figuring it out in real time, and Indiana has no counter to throw at them. Sophie even spelled out how opponents are exploiting it. When the Fever switch everything, Aaliyah Boston ends up guarded by a smaller player on the post, which should be an advantage for Indiana. But the flip side is that Clark, Mitchell, or Hull ends up matched up against a bigger player on the perimeter with no help behind them. Opponents aren't hunting Indiana's scheme because they're clever. They're hunting it because Indiana is telling them exactly where to look every single time down the floor. Draymond Green made this exact point recently, and he wasn't even talking about Indiana. He was breaking down why you can't switch everything at the championship level. His framing was direct. When you soft switch every screen, you're giving the ball handler a full runway to set up wherever they want, and by the time your defender reacts, the offense is already moving downhill at full speed. The defense is always a step behind. That's not a personnel problem, that's a scheme problem.
This isn't just a coaching issue. When you're trying to compete at a championship level, you must have guys that want to take on that challenge. I'm not switching at this point in the game. Let them set the first screen, don't switch. Let them set the second screen, don't switch. I don't understand it. Guys simply don't know how to win, don't want to do what it takes. I was baffled by this. I'm still baffled by it every night when I watch these guys accept switches and not really want to guard the guy.
Sophie knows it. She said it out loud. We had probably 10 of them last year. If you can't execute them, you can't do them. But then she went further, and this is the part that landed like a grenade in the locker room. She said that out of 5 players on the floor, maybe 3 can execute the other defensive schemes. The other 2 can't. And in a system where defense requires all 5 people to be in the right place at the right time, 2 breakdowns don't create 2 problems. They create chaos on every possession because the whole structure collapses the moment someone misses their assignment. So what did White say when reporters brought Sophie's comments back to her? She talked about scaling back to build confidence, about choosing one thing and trying to do it well before expanding. That's the coaching version of admitting the playbook isn't working. You don't scale back to build confidence when everything's going fine. You scale back because the alternative is watching your defense fall apart every time you try something new.
Sophie talked about only having one defensive scheme and that you guys are able to execute, and how that teams are able to kind of pick that apart. Just how do you as a coaching staff get it so you're able to fully install more defensive schemes to be able to do it?
Yeah, I think we had an opportunity based on matchup to really try to hone in on one. When you're not executing a lot of things really well, you want to scale back and try to execute 1 or 2 really well and sort of get a mindset and get some confidence. But then you got to be able to expand.
Sophie's challenge to her teammates was blunt, public, and pointed at specific people without naming names. If you can't do that, then you can't play. And that's the point where we're at right now. That's not a veteran being frustrated. That's a veteran drawing a line.
And I think part of that is challenging them to be able to do that and do that consistently. I think part of that's ownership, of our players to be able to do it. Again, we have a lot of new players who are playing, who have been in different kinds of systems and who've been asked to do different things. And we got to connect, all of that to what we're trying to do. So, some of it we throw it out there and we see how much we can absorb, and then we understand we need to scale back, and then we understand to push a little bit further.
The Portland blowout gave everyone a clear view of the scheme problem. The multiple separate incidents caught on camera. Clark ripping her hand away from Stephanie White during a timeout. Not a subtle pull, a full snatch, visible from the upper deck. Clark and Brianne January going back and forth on the bench so intensely that Clark eventually got up, walked to the other end of the bench and sat alone, shaking her head after timeouts, moving her seat mid-game to put physical distance between herself and the coaching staff. These aren't isolated moments from a competitive player having a rough night. This is a pattern across 2 different games, on 2 different coasts, against 2 different opponents, caught from multiple camera angles by people who weren't even trying to find it.
Look at this. Crashed out on her, subbed her out. Look, then she throws the clipboard down. Throws the clipboard. Okay. Don't sign no epic deal, Caitlin Clark. Get the fuck out of Indiana. Leave this clown show of an organization. And Caitlin Clark got to the podium and let it be known that Stephanie White was her problem tonight, not the refs.
Clark's public response was controlled. She said the relationship with White is great, said White had her back when nobody else did, pointed to the moment White held her after the Connecticut injury last year. And look, nobody is saying that bond isn't real. But the body language on that bench tells a different story than the press conference answers. Both things can be true at once. You can have genuine respect for someone and still be at the end of your rope with how they're running the team. Colin Cowherd put it in language everyone understood. He compared Clark directly to Michael Jordan. Same arc, same trajectory, rookie sensation into a season-ending injury into year 3 where the stats are undeniable, and then asked the obvious question. When does she start winning? His answer was that she has her Pippen in Kelsey Mitchell, but she doesn't have her Phil Jackson. And without the coach who can build the system around a player like that, the rings don't come. Cowherd went on record with that. Not an anonymous source, not a fan account. A national radio host with a decades-long track record said the current coaching situation is what's standing between Clark and championships. Then Dan Dockich went further. Dockich has a documented decades-long relationship with former Fever GM Lynn Dunn. She's been on his show repeatedly. When he came out and called Clark a complete pain-in-the-ass diva, he didn't frame it as his opinion. He said it was a direct quote from people inside the organization. His exact words, "That's not me talking. That's a direct quote from people in the Fever.
But the truth of the matter is, it is a massive indictment how the other players around Clark play, are comfortable, are more competitive. When her ass isn't in there taking bad shots, being a pain in the ass, not guarding anybody, it isn't an indictment, and I'll let him finish here, of everybody else. It's an indictment of Clark, period.
Sit with that for a second. Someone inside that building, someone with access to the front office, the coaching staff, or both, described the player who single-handedly sold out their arena, tripled their merchandise revenue, and brought national television coverage back to women's basketball in Indiana as a diva. That's not frustration leaking out. That's coordinated messaging. And Dockett's track record with Lynn Dunn is what makes it land differently than random speculation. Sophie's defense of White, when reporters asked her directly about the coach-player dynamic, was as diplomatic as she could make it. You need a coach that's going to believe in you when sometimes you don't believe in yourself. And Steph is that for all of us. Fine, except Sophie had spent the previous 10 minutes of that same availability telling reporters the team only has one defensive scheme and two players who can't execute what's being asked of them. Those two statements don't sit comfortably next to each other. The defense of White is real. So is everything Sophie said before it.
A frustrating game like that, Portland game due for, do this kind of meeting, getting you guys to do certain things you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to have these meetings, but every team has them. Everyone has trials. Everyone has shortcomings, and I'm just thankful ours is at the beginning of the season and not during, September, October. But I don't even know what Portland. We didn't even watch film. That tells you how bad it is. And normally she's watching every second of it. And so we wanted to flush that one. Everyone knew it was bad. We all kind of watched it on our own. And it's just not acceptable. We're too good to be playing like that. I think that tough conversations need to be had, and we have a mature group that wants to hear, honest feedback. And it's up to us players to, keep ourselves accountable. And if you can't keep yourself accountable, have a teammate that you trust that can help you stay accountable. And like I said, we have the pieces. You guys have seen we can be really, really good. You guys have also seen we can be really, really bad. So it's about consistency at this point.
That's a 9-year professional telling you the Emperor has no clothes. Not a frustrated rookie, not a player angling for minutes. Kelsey Mitchell, one of the 2 or 3 most important players on this roster, publicly saying the team is not great and needs to stop pretending otherwise before anything can actually improve. White's framing of the film decision, that the X's and O's from Portland weren't going to move the team forward, is either genuine coaching instinct about when a team needs to flush a game and reset mentally, or it's a head coach who knew that putting that film on a screen in front of her players would expose every wrong call she made in sequence. Could be both. Probably is both. The Commissioner's Cup gives Indiana something concrete to aim at before the losses start compounding in the standings. Sophie acknowledged that directly, called it a blessing that this is happening in June and not September. But the window is not open indefinitely. Every game that goes sideways from here tightens the margin for the meeting to have actually meant something. Either Thursday changes the energy, or the 2 hours spent peeling back the layers was just the most expensive therapy session in Indiana Fever history.
We have them. We have a ton of them. We try to do them, but they just break down because we can't execute. And when I say that, maybe 3 people can execute, but if those other 2 players can't, it's a breakdown on defense. And so 1 through 5, it's hard. Defense is hard, and we all just have to kind of, commit ourselves to doing hard stuff. And if you want to win, then you have to do hard stuff.
Sophie Cunningham didn't just defend Caitlin Clark. She handed the public a detailed autopsy of what's failing and who owns it. Clark is putting up historic numbers in year 3, coming off a season-ending injury. She's doing her part. The coaching staff has one defensive scheme, a front office leaking hit pieces, and a head coach who couldn't praise a 30-point comeback when the question was asked directly. Boston, Mitchell, Cunningham, Hull, Clark. That roster wins a championship with the right coach. Why do you think the Indiana Fever is broken, and what should the team do about it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss out on all things basketball. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.